Okay, so get this. We're going deep on a story today that sounds like, I don't know, straight out of a fantasy novel. Imagine like a single flower,
Mm-hmm.
a tulip, actually,
Okay.
costing more than like a whole house.
Wow.
And not just any house.
Right.
We're talking a fancy Amsterdam canal house.
Oh, wow.
Sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
Well, it happened. It's Tulipmania, one of history's, I think you could say, most confusing economic bubbles.
What's interesting about this is that this wasn't, just a fad or something.
Yeah.
This really gripped the Dutch Republic in the 17th century. And I think it tells us a lot about human psychology, like the desire to get rich quick and how easy it is to just get caught up in all the hype.
Let's go back in time to the Dutch Golden Age.
Hmm.
So like the 1600s.
Mm-hmm.
Amsterdam is like this booming global trade hub,
Right.
just
Yep.
overflowing with, exotic goods from everywhere.
Yeah.
Netherlands is a powerhouse. You've got wealthy merchants. They're kind of like showing off their new wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And then into this scene comes the tulip.
And the thing is, the tulip wasn't actually from Europe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it came from the Ottoman Empire, where it was super important in Turkish culture. So picture these vibrant, exotic flowers just like arriving in this society that's already kind of obsessed with luxury and anything new.
So it's kind of like the newest iPhone dropping today.
Yeah.
Everyone's got to have it.
Exactly. And there was this guy, Carolus Clusius, a super famous botanist, who was actually trying to grow these tulips, but he ended up making them even more popular.
So he's like the OG influencer.
Uh-huh.
What made these tulips, especially like the broken ones, so desirable?
Okay, so they were definitely beautiful. The broken tulips, they had these amazing patterns and streaks of color, like almost psychedelic.
Wow.
But, and this is kind of funny, what people didn't realize was that these patterns were actually caused by a virus.
Wait, so they were paying like a ton of money for a beautiful disease.
Yeah.
That's ironic.
It is, and it just shows you how speculation can just, I don't know, detach from reality. People were so into these rare tulips that they didn't even think about, like, what was causing them.
And this wasn't just like the rich people, right? This tulip craze, I mean, it was spreading everywhere.
Yeah, so the tulip market, it went from those early trades between, like, botanists and the rich people to, like, merchants, artisans, even farmers. It was a huge deal, like touched almost everyone in Dutch society.
So how did it go from this small market to like a full-blown, everyone's going crazy frenzy?
So they started using futures contracts of what the Dutch called wind handle.
Wind handle.
What does that mean?
It means wind trade.
Wind trade. That sounds, I don't know, kind of shady, like trading something that's not even there.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
People were buying and selling tulips that hadn't even bloomed yet.
Oh, wow.
Tulips that were still in the ground. Like they were betting on how much something would be worth in the future. That might not even happen. That's a huge gamble. Where were all these tulip deals happening? Were there like tulip exchanges?
You're not going to believe this, but a lot of it was happening in taverns.
Really?
Yeah, picture this. Smoky rooms, people drinking beer and like betting their life saving, sometimes their whole homes on tulips. It just made it seem like anyone could get rich.
So it's less Wall Street, more like casino vibes.
Yeah.
So you've got this society like obsessed with status symbols. They're fascinated by these exotic flowers. Then you've got, futures trading coming in and everyone's worried about missing out.
Right.
Perfect recipe for a bubble, right?
Totally. The psychology of speculation, it's a powerful thing. People get driven by, fear of missing out. They see everyone else doing it, so they're like, I gotta do it too.
Yeah.
And then there's this belief that prices will just keep going up forever.
And we're not talking about small amounts of money here.
Right.
Right. I mean, we're talking some serious cash.
There's this famous example, the Semper Augustus tulip, a rare one with these beautiful white and red flames on the petals.
Okay.
One bulb of this thing was said to be worth like a whole fancy Amsterdam canal house.
A whole house for a tulip.
Yeah.
That's insane. I can't even imagine trading my apartment for a whole bouquet, let alone a single bulb.
And it wasn't just houses. There are stories of people trading livestock, jewelry, entire estates, all for some tulip bulbs. It was a time when people weren't really thinking straight. They were just like obsessed with these flowers. So we're back digging deeper into tulip mania. It's wild to think that, something as simple as a flower could cause this huge economic frenzy.
Yeah, and last time we were talking about how tulip prices, I mean, they went through the roof. People were literally trading their homes or livelihoods for a chance to, get in on this flower gold rush.
Right.
But we were also talking about how these broken tulips, like the ones driving everyone crazy, they were actually infected with a virus. Did anyone back then even know that?
No, they didn't. Back then, nobody knew anything about plant viruses. People just saw those crazy patterns and colors and thought, like, oh, that's just natural variation. Maybe they even thought it was, like a sign from God or something. It's kind of crazy how, like, not knowing the science can make people go even more nuts for something.
Yeah, like you were buying into a mystery. But even without the science, I mean, somebody had to have seen this tulip craze coming, right? Like a train wreck about to happen.
Oh, there were definitely some skeptics, some smart people, government officials, financial experts. They were like, hey, this is not going to end well. But nobody really listened to them.
Right.
Everyone was too caught up in the tulip mania.
Classic case of, what do they call it? Confirmation bias. Like when people only see what they want to see, even if it makes no sense.
Exactly. And I mean, back then, the idea of getting rich quick was just too strong. It blinded people to the risks. It was like a collective delusion fueled by, I don't know, greed, social pressure, FOMO, the whole nine yards.
So let's break down this psychology of speculation stuff. Like, what made normal people do such risky stuff?
One big thing is what we call social contagion. Like emotions and behaviors, they can spread like a virus through a group of people. And with tulip mania, that excitement about the tulips, it was contagious.
So it's like one person sneezes and everyone gets tulip fever.
Haha, yeah, something like that.
Right.
And it just keeps feeding itself. More people buy tulips, the prices go up, even more people want to join in. They don't want to miss out.
That FOMO thing again.
Hmm.
But was it just about making money? Or was there something more to it?
Oh, there was definitely a status thing going on. Back then in Holland, showing off your wealth was a big deal. And owning those rare tulips, especially the ones with the crazy patterns, that was like the ultimate way to show off.
So it wasn't enough to have a nice house or fancy clothes.
Yeah.
You had to have the rarest tulip to be cool.
Exactly. Tulips became like status symbols on steroids. Then that need to be cool mixed with wanting to get rich quick, well, that's a recipe for people to do crazy things.
It's crazy how our brains can, like, totally ignore logic when we get caught up in stuff like that.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. It shows how easily we can be influenced. But it also reminds us that this stuff happens all the time, not just with money.
So it's just like human nature 101, right? Greed, fear, following the crowd. It's easy to judge those tulip traders from back then, but who's to say we wouldn't do the same thing?
That's a good question. We might think we're smarter, but history kind of proves us wrong. Think about the South Sea bubble, the dot-com bubble, even what happened with some cryptocurrencies.
So the tulips change, but people stay the same.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to understand this stuff, not just for investing, but for making good decisions in general.
Okay, so how do we avoid getting tulip mania'd in our own lives? How do we stay grounded when everyone's losing their minds?
That's the million-dollar question. There's no magic solution, but there are some things that can help.
So let's start with investing. What's the best advice for someone who doesn't want to get sucked into a bubble?
First thing, do your research. Like, really understand what you're investing in. Don't just follow the crowd. Take your time, look at the actual value, the risks, think long term.
So don't invest in something you don't get no matter how good it sounds.
Right. And be skeptical. Don't just believe everything you hear. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. There's no such thing as a guaranteed get-rich-quick scheme.
So a little bit of doubt can be a good thing. What about emotions? We've talked about fear and greed. How do we control that stuff when it comes to money?
That's where knowing yourself comes in. You got to figure out what makes you tick, what makes you emotional, and how that affects your decisions. If you feel yourself getting swept up in the excitement, that FOMO feeling, step back and think.
So take a breather, check yourself, and ask, am I being logical here, or am I letting my emotions take over?
Exactly. It also helps to have a plan for your investments, one that fits your goals and how much risk you're comfortable with. This can help you stay on track and not make impulsive decisions.
Have a plan, stick to it, and don't let FOMO, or the dream of getting rich, quick mess up your goals.
Right. And don't be afraid to ask for help from a financial advisor. They can give you an outside perspective, help you see the risks, and guide you towards investments that make sense for you.
So do your research, be skeptical, manage your emotions, have a plan, and maybe get some professional advice. Those are some pretty solid tips for, navigating the world of investing.
Definitely. But these ideas, they're not just for investing. They can help us make better decisions in every part of our lives, like our jobs, relationships, even personal goals.
So Tulipmania isn't just a lesson for Wall Street, it's a lesson for everyone.
Exactly. By understanding what drives speculation, how markets work, and how we can be, well, kind of foolish sometimes, we can make smarter choices and maybe avoid getting caught in the next big bubble, whatever it might be.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Tulipmania. It's been a wild ride through like 17th century Holland, exploring this crazy speculative bubble. Seems so bizarre, but also kind of familiar.
Yeah, it's a story that just keeps fascinating people even after all these centuries. We've talked about the economics and the psychology behind tulipmania, but there's another part we need to look at, like what it left behind.
Right. The Dutch economy bounced back from that tulip crash, but did it, I don't know, change how people thought about investing,
Yeah.
about risk?
Even though the Dutch Republic recovered pretty quickly, people didn't forget about tulipmania. It definitely shaped how they thought about speculation and financial markets for a long time after.
So it became like a cautionary tale, right? A reminder to not go crazy.
Exactly. And that lesson was important for the next generations of Dutch merchants and investors. It made them more careful, more aware of bubbles, and that probably helped to keep the Dutch economy stable in the long run.
It's interesting how something that caused so much trouble could also lead to like more stability later on.
It shows that even from the craziest times, we can learn and make things better.
So Tulipmania's legacy is kind of weird, right? A story of going overboard, but also learning to be careful, of reckless speculation, but also gaining wisdom.
Yeah, and it wasn't just about economics. Tulipmania showed up in art, literature, popular culture. It became a symbol for foolishness, for greed, for how easily we can be fooled.
We see that in the paintings and plays from that time. They made fun of those tulip traders who were blinded by chasing easy money.
And all of that helped to solidify Tulipmania's place in history. It made sure that people would remember its lessons and pass them down.
So it wasn't just an economic thing, it was a whole cultural phenomenon that changed Dutch society and even beyond.
Yeah, its influence went way beyond the Netherlands. Tulipmania became a global symbol for bubbles, a cautionary tale that people reference in books, movies, even economic analysis today.
It's like the ultimate economic cautionary tale. Every time there's a market frenzy, whether it's for Beanie Babies or tech stocks or crypto, the ghost of tulip mania pops up.
And that's because the basic patterns are the same. Whether it's a flower or a stock or a digital currency, the desire to get rich quick combined with the fear of missing out, it can push people to make bad decisions, and that creates bubbles that eventually burst.
So what are the big lessons from tulip mania that we can apply to our lives today? We talked about being skeptical, doing our research, managing our emotions, and having a plan. But is there anything else, like any bigger takeaways?
One of the most important lessons is to think critically. Tulipmania reminds us to question what we hear, to challenge the usual way of thinking, and to be careful of stories that promise easy money or guaranteed success.
Don't just believe everything you're told, even if it comes from someone who seems like they know what they're talking about. Look deeper, ask questions, and be willing to challenge the way things are.
Exactly. And along with that, it's important to learn from history. Tulipmania is just one example of how the past can teach us about the present. By studying history, we can understand human behavior, how economies work, and the ups and downs of markets.
It's like history isn't just about old textbooks and dates. It's a way to learn and make better decisions in our own lives.
Exactly. And lastly, I think tulipmania shows us how important humility is. Those tulip traders, they thought they were so smart that they had figured out a way to beat the system. But, as we know, pride often leads to failure.
So a little bit of humility can be a good thing, especially when it comes to money and life in general.
Definitely. It can help us avoid making rash choices, encourage us to look at things from different angles, and remind us that even the smartest people can be irrational and get caught up in groupthink.
It seems like the lessons of tulip mania are just as relevant today as they were back then. Markets may change, but people don't.
It's a story that still has a lot to teach us, challenging our assumptions and reminding us that humans can be, well, quite foolish sometimes.
So next time you see a market going crazy, whether it's for a new gadget, a hot stock, or even a digital asset, remember those Dutch tulip traders and ask yourself, am I getting caught up in the hype? Am I making a smart decision, or am I just following the crowd?
Those are great questions to ask. And maybe, instead of trying to get rich quick, we should all just take a minute to enjoy the beauty of a tulip. It's a good reminder that the best things in life aren't always about money.
Well said. And that's our deep dive into tulip mania. We hope you enjoyed this journey through history, economics, and how people behave.
Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and remember, sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected places.